Today on What's Unsaid, double standards leave local aid workers unprotected.
Money should not be an excuse. I think it's related to the leadership of the organization. It's related to the senior team, how their understanding of dealing with the locals and international staff.
Local staff are the backbone of the international humanitarian system. But when danger comes, who actually gets protected? When the Taliban came storming into Kabul in 2021, or when Sudan's military split and started fighting in the capital last year, foreign aid workers were flown out immediately to protect them from the perceived security threat. But their local counterparts are told to stay put. This double standard is an open secret. The vast majority of aid workers killed on duty are local staff, but they receive the least protection, from evacuations to insurance to training. Why is the same duty of care not extended to national aid workers, risking their lives on the front lines? This is What's Unsaid, a bi-weekly podcast by the New Humanitarian, where we explore open secrets and uncomfortable conversations around the world's conflicts and disasters. My name is Obianya Dike, staff editor of the New Humanitarian. On today's episode, double standards leave local aid workers unprotected. Joining us is Othman Moqbel. He is the CEO of Action for Humanity. They claim they're breaking the mold by ensuring the same protection for all staff. Othman, thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much.
On this vexed issue of double standards between national staff and international staff, can you explain to us what that means in an ongoing crisis? How, for example, is this shaking out in Gaza?
In our work, the staff, the employees, are the core of the business. And as we always help others, we should first help our team, especially the locals. And we have seen different crises. Just in 2023, we have seen like 4 or 5 major crises. And each of them, every time, gives me more evidence that there is a double standard when we deal with the local staff and international staff. Take Gaza as an example now. According to the UN, you have, I think the last statistics is more than 100. They were killed inside Gaza recently. And all of them are locals. And the question for me is, what kind of protection, what kind of duty of care the UN agencies and other NGOs they have for the staff in Gaza? I have seen different examples. However, the headline here is, as NGOs, as charities, values should be on top of our business. So therefore, double standard should not be or shouldn't have a place in our business when we work with those who are in need. And in most cases, our local staff are part of that community that is in need. The duty of care, it has many definitions, but in my practical, let me put it this way, it is you take care of your staff, help them, support them, be sure that they have the same level of support like your staff in the HQ or any other international staff around the globe.
The devastating earthquakes in 2023 was shocking and dramatic. And a lot of staff from your organization, Action for Humanity, were also personally affected. Can you share examples of exactly how you try to ensure the well-being of all your staff?
As you know, this is one of the crises that really hit heavily the humanitarians, especially the local staff in Syria and in Turkey. And in our case, I personally traveled there 2 days after the earthquake. My leadership team there received instruction from the first hour that the top priority is the well-being of the staff. So we have staff who have been living for years in Hatay. And as you know, Hatay was the most affected area in the south of Turkey, near the border of Syria. We have put a plan and agreed first to evacuate every single staff with his family, even the extended family, to a safe city, which in that case was Mersin. Mersin was a safe city, around 4 to 5 hours from Hatay and Gaziantep. So we managed to gather all our staff from all the cities and took them all to Mersin. In Mersin, we have booked hotels, we rented buildings to be sure that every person comes with his family, accommodation is there, place for an office is there. After the 4th day of the earthquake, all our staff gathered together in Mersin. We rented a big hall in one of the hotels in Mersin, just in case if anyone wants to come and work. I was very surprised when I saw most of the staff, they came to work a few days after that, say, look, we are responsible. Yes, we're hit by this. And I can tell you every single member of my staff, they lost members of their families, either a very close family or the extended family. In Syria side, the team, although they lost members of their families, they continued their good work hours after the earthquake. So we put during this crisis the well-being of our team, because if we did not take care of our team, they won't be able to function and support those who were affected by the earthquake inside Syria and in Turkey. And I have seen, until this my visit, last visit, that still NGOs, their staff scattered around the country in Turkey. The leadership went to a safe area without taking the rest of the team. Senior team, international team, they are in Ankara, they are in Istanbul. However, the rest of the team, where are they? They still struggling here and there. What we have done, we covered the accommodation, we covered the transport, we covered the food, we covered everything for the staff. That cost us, as you know, tens of thousands, while they were staying in Mersin. Some of them, their accommodation, their houses even took 4, 5, 6 months to be fixed. So we were responsible until they moved back to their homes and to their flats.
Adopting a duty of care position, it seems a responsible and humane approach that all aid organizations should adopt. So why isn't it being replicated? Is it just the price tag issue?
In theory, most of the NGOs and even NGOs, they have a policy, this policy of duty of care. The problem we have is to put it in practice. I'm not sure what are the reasons. It might be one of them is cost. It might be one of them is our ethical understanding and ethical behavior. We still believe that the local does not have the right, like the international staff. We have to advocate for the right of the locals. Especially, we can easily say that always the locals are the first group of people who go and help and support during the crisis. And in many crises, as you NGOs usually arrive, 5, 6 days, 1 week after that. Inside Syria for, I think, weeks, no one arrived inside, because one of the reasons was the border as well affected between Turkey and Syria.
How do we go about advocating for this type of ethical leadership that you're pointing to?
I have done some research in 2018 about ethical leadership in the NGO sector, the third sector. And during my research and literature review, I really didn't find much in this topic. And my conclusion that time that we assume that those who work for charities, who work for NGOs, we assume they are ethical because they have the passion they have. In reality, this is not anymore. Maybe this was in 80s and 90s and before 2000, maybe possible when the first generation established these charities because each charity, each INGO historically was linked to a crisis. As you know, there are a few scandals in the last 10, 15 years and really affected heavily the INGO sector. And I say that only because of one reason, that the leadership lacking the ethical leadership, ethics and values. And because of that, when we discuss double standard, as you know, it is part of our ethical understanding. So if we have that ethics, this terminology of double standard should not be in our dictionary.
This type of double standard, it seems more evident during a crisis. But how does it manifest itself outside of times of disaster?
To be honest, it's not easy to have evidence outside the disaster. I believe that we need to advocate for some kind of audit. You know, we do a financial audit, we do this audit, we do that audit. So we need to advocate and maybe think about a body that can make some kind of audit outside the crisis time. Some kind of audit that we see when you have a duty of care policy, how much of that you applied when it comes to the local. And that during outside the crisis, because maybe during the crisis is not easy to do some of that. But now normally when we have no crisis, if we do some kind of audit, you will discover a lot of these things. And therefore, when it comes to advocacy, I think we need to work hand in hand and advocate for the right of the locals. And in Action for Humanity, localization is in the heart of our business.
The aid sector loves to talk about localization, which also means more national staff are being hired or should be hired. So to what extent do these localization discussions also focus on duty of care practices?
To be honest with you, I have attended many meetings related to localization. I didn't hear anything about duty of care. And there was no discussion. It's not in the agenda. So the last review, I don't think the INGOs even reached 10% of what they promised after the Humanitarian Summit in 2016. So therefore, the duty of care is in the heart of localization. But even localization itself is not implemented properly until now.
So back to the issue of normalization, what are the underlying reasons for this to continue to exist? You mentioned money earlier on. Anything else that kind of promotes this practice?
Money should not be an excuse, because we know when we send international staff, when they go to the field, how much the cost of sending international staff. So I don't really believe that money should be an excuse. As I said earlier, I think it's related to the leadership of the organization. It's related to the senior team, how their understanding of dealing with the locals and international staff. I'll give you an example. When I was in Turkey this time, there's a case I was dealing with it, that a friend who was killed during the earthquake and left behind him wife and children. And so I know the family. I dealt with the case in a personal level, and they work with the INGO. And after these few months, yes, the wife and the children received something. But when I analyzed the case, it's really not acceptable in the end what compensation they were given. And I asked this question again. If the one who was killed in this earthquake was international, do we deal with his family at the same level? And it was shame case. People even talk about it months after the earthquake.
Can I ask you how your organization actually was able to support its staff during the earthquake, for example? You put staff up in hotels, extended families, months on end, hugely costly. How did you factor that into your budgets? How did you make that possible?
To be honest with you, it was financially not easy. However, our business model based on partnership, working with other INGOs here and there. So firstly, we covered that budget from our budget, from different budgets. After the earthquake, just when things settled a little bit, we applied for other INGOs who support us in different fronts. I think some of them, and I would like to thank them, they understood that big burden and organization like us cannot just cope. So they helped to cover some of that expenses. However, still good amount came out from our budget.
And for other INGOs, how to implement this kind of best practice? We can kind of understand it for the big international organizations, the UN, etc. But for smaller INGOs, how do we replicate this approach? What examples or what advice would you even give?
The local NGOs, they have issue with finance. So the INGOs sometimes, they don't deal with the locals as a partners. They deal with them as subcontractors. So therefore, in most of my visits to the field, so because they are subcontractors for big INGOs, so the budget always is limited. So they don't have a space to use like unrestricted money to support that for training, for capacity building, unless it is budgeted. And usually, how much you can take from INGOs for this? INGOs, they should, in their budgets, when they give a project to any local NGO, they should include budget for capacity building, for training, and a duty of care.
Just finally, Othman, how hopeful are you that this mindset, this double standard, can actually change across the board?
I'm always optimistic. There is a room for improvement. There is a room for better understanding. There is a room for even better practice as well. However, I think we need to have a clear picture how we can advocate for this. Yani I was very, very, very really happy and pleased during the edX when there was a workshop and discussion about duty of care. And there I participated in the discussion and see. So number one, we need to put it in the top of our agenda. In our conferences, in our exhibitions, in our whatever conventions. So we have to put it. This is number one. Number two, we need to write about it. We need to organize, maybe send letters to the INGOs, UN agencies. Fourth, maybe we need as well to organize just meetings, workshops to discuss this in details. And not only with the INGOs, we need as well to train the local NGOs to tell them about their rights. So they have to fight for their rights and the right of their locals. And you can understand sometimes the locals, because they are desperate to implement any project. In many cases, they accept to take the project regardless of the admin cost or support cost or any other cost. Because they say, no, I'm doing this for passion. I want to help my people. We should not wait for others to advocate. We should do it as part of our ethics and values as a leaders of this sector.
Othman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Othman Moqbel is the CEO of the emergency response organisation Humanitarian Action. Do visit thenewhumanitarian.org for ongoing reporting on issues and policies affecting aid workers. What are people afraid to talk about in today's crises? What needs to be discussed openly? Let us know. Send us an email, podcast@thenewhumanitarian.org. Subscribe to The New Humanitarian on your podcast app for more episodes of What's Unsaid, our podcast about open secrets and uncomfortable truths, with new episodes every other week. This episode is produced and edited by Marta van der Wolf, sound engineering by Mark Nieto, with original music by Whitney Patterson, and hosted by me, Obi Anyadike.